Good evening. My name is Muthu. I'm from HDIC. We're going to get started. It's already 5 past 5. We're delighted this evening to have Lakshmi with us. Most of you know who he is. He's one of the leading IT personnel in this country and around the world. But still, it's only fair I give him a little bit of an introduction. He has spent his professional career 35 years in the IT industry, with the last few years in leadership and governance role at Cognizant Board. He's now sort of retired from Cognizant, and not retired, but retired from Cognizant. He's passionate about encouraging young minds to seek a larger purpose in life and encourage them to realize their potential through higher education and entrepreneurship. He plays an active role in ICT education and promoting research in maths and computer science. His association with ICT Academy, Chennai Mathematical Institution, and Tyagarajan School of Management are aimed at promoting excellence in higher education. Lakshmi also spends a lot of time in nonprofit organizations such as United Way, Child's Trust Research Foundation, and others to advance the cause of disadvantaged people and creating meaningful livelihood opportunities in the area of agriculture, skill development, and IT industry. He supports young entrepreneurs through angel investment as part of the Chennai Angels and the Thai organization. Lakshmi, thank you very much for being here with us this evening. We are so fortunate to have you, even though you haven't visited me at my new center. The COVID has made you visit me online. So thank you very much for having you here. This is a very chill session. We usually ask the speaker to maybe give a quick 5 minutes of his views, and then we open it for conversation, and we get about 40-50 people coming online and speaking. And we are also very fortunate to have Shankar. He's just observing how this is done, so he can help me one of these days as well. He's here too. And a few others I see are all there. So over to you, Lakshmi, to have your opening comments.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Muthu. Nice to be here this evening. I see that quite a few people who have signed up. Hope we'll have a good interaction as we go forward. By way of opening remarks, I think I must say something about working from home business, which is something that all of you must be going through. It's very, very different, somewhat difficult to adapt to also. I mean, for a retired person like me, if I find it a little difficult to adapt to, I'm sure for those of you who are working, who are used to going to the office every day, it must be quite a challenge. If this were to have happened in a kind of a transition, we would have been better in adapting, because workplace is not just a place where we work, get a salary that pays our bills, etc. I mean, it's a place where we are emotionally connected. There are relationships that gives us our identity. It's a place for our self-development, growth, learning, teaching, making the connections, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. All that is somehow kind of being weaned away from us very, very gradually. So I don't know what the consequences are going to be. It's not just working from home, but it's also working with home, which has its own other challenges there. So it is an important time for all of you to think about this a little more, invest time and effort in getting adjusted to this in a gradual manner, and seek help if you have challenges getting used to this new environment. That is the first point that I want to make. The second one is, of course, something related to healthcare, the sector that all of you are focusing on, where there is a lot of innovation that is happening. Just before coming here, there was an hour and a half presentation by Loyal Textiles, where they have come up with PPE, personal protection equipment, and the suits that are used by frontline medical professionals that guarantees 99.99, almost 4 nines, bacteria and virus free, and particularly coronavirus at the scale of something like 4 nanometers. There's a good technical presentation. It's something that the company has innovated, a textile company working with Reliance. Reliance Industries have I didn't know about this, R-Elan, a fabric unit that does all this for specialty fabric for firefighters, for medical workers, etc., including some components for the spacesuit. And then a Swiss company called HeyQ, I think, that has come up with the technology that kills viruses using silver ion technology. I mean, they went into great detail explaining that. So they've come up with the suit that is reusable, washable and reusable up to about 25 times. Perhaps a little expensive, but it has been designed keeping in view easy ways of donning and doffing that suit, etc. So we see innovation happening all around, particularly in the health sector, some of which is driven by the current crisis, the current pandemic that we have. And it's encouraging to see so many people who are participating in this type of an activity. I'm sure IIT Madras Research Park and HTIC also has its share of interesting things that are happening. The one thing that I wanted to just talk about is, kind of a passion or a dream, not really a passion, but a dream that what if the next vaccine that is effective against coronavirus and that breed and the next set of viruses and the previous set of viruses is invented in India? Can we do that? Are there people working on it? You must have read something about the Bharat Biotech that is coming up with or that is getting into trials with this type of a vaccine. But there are also a lot of research going on in that area. Well supported and well funded. I'm sure there will be a vaccine that will come out of some of the laboratories that are working on it, very specifically based on the science in which we kind of excel. I think the pioneering work in this was done by Nobel laureate Ramakrishnan Venkatraman, our own person, who talked about the structure of ribosomes, the proteins, and he was coming at it at a different angle of how antibiotics can be created that can morph the size and shape of ribosomes and kill them. So on the similar lines, there's a lot of work that's going on in this industry. In addition, of course, there are a lot of devices that are coming up in the market. So an exciting place to be in at this point in time. Some of my investments in that area are also hopefully rewarding in the future, but certainly very, very encouraging to learn and provides a platform. I just want to mention there's a company that is trying to manufacture a stethoscope, cordless, not the original Littmann type of stethoscope, but it's a wireless that you use connected via Bluetooth that shares the information, all the readings to an AI engine, and does a whole lot of diagnostics that we can't get in stethoscopes. So AI is dead. And things like that. Okay, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it. So these are the opening remarks, essentially to say, wish you all well in the current circumstances, current conditions of working. Hope you get used to working in the new way. And two, innovation is alive and healthy. Lots and lots of activities in the healthcare sector. So many of which I'm sure you know. Some of the things that I know a little more about, I'll share with you as we go forward. And the last point is building organizations. Building organizations is probably the theme that you have all come to expect me talk about, and also you have questions around that. It's very difficult to say these are the 5 steps or the 10 steps in building the organization. It's something that evolves. You start with an idea, you start with a set of people, you develop a certain behavior, certain culture in the organization, try out certain things, take some risks, and progressively every day you learn and decide that this is what I want to be doing for the next 1 week. This is what I want to be doing for the next 1 month, for the next 5 years, for the next 20 years, and so on and so forth. And that's where teams and people get together and make things happen. So the key component from my perspective in building an organization is a leader, a good leader, an inspiring leader, a leader with good values, a leader whose behavior can be emulated by others, and a team of people who have similar ethos, similar ambitions, similar values, working together in a nice, egoless environment. And that's a foundation block for building an organization. Then, of course, there are other things like a performance ethic, goal, alignment, etc. that quite a few of you will be familiar with. But I'll pause here and wait for some comments, any questions, any directions. That'll be useful.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for that opening remarks. Fantastic. Anybody wants to ask questions, please post it on the chat and I will then direct you to ask. But I'll get just started by asking Lakshmi, as he said, the theme for this evening is primarily how would you build an organization. So the first question I have for you, Lakshmi, what would your advice be when young entrepreneurs get set out? What would you ask them to sort of, if they had to look at one thing, what would you suggest they should be looking out, irrelevant of what they are getting into?
I mean, the first question that I would ask them is, why do they want to do what they want to do? What's the purpose? There must be some larger purpose for doing something. You know, as most HR professionals talk about, you take up a job, and then build a career out of it, and then you realize there is a certain purpose in life, and then move from that career to fulfilling that purpose, that calling. So to understand from that entrepreneur the why they are doing what they are doing, the purpose is probably my starting point. I'll ask them, what is it that is driving them to do? In fact, it has to be narrated in a proper manner. Many of the people know that this is a standard question that is asked, so they come with a prepared story. You know, some of the entrepreneurs that I've listened to, when they make a pitch, they come with a story which is ready-made, which is probably true. In most cases, it will be true, but it appears very artificial. They say, hey, when I was a child, or when I was this thing, my father did this, and that is the time I decided that I want to be such and such a thing, etc., etc. So if you have a good, credible story that you believe in, that is what has driven you to doing what you're doing, then that's a good cause, that's a good purpose, and that has a backing, that has got deep-seated roots in your mind. So you'll be successful. That's the first question that I'll ask.
That's very candid of you by saying they all come with a prepared answer by saying they're passionate because their mother told them to do or their father told them to do so. And you're right, that's pretty much usually the opening point by many of these startups. Now, the next question I have for you while we wait for people to post questions is, do you think the startups should focus from day one on the financials, how they're going to run it, what they're going to do, the financial health of the organization? Should that be top priority from day one?
No, I wouldn't say that's the top priority from day one. In fact, one of the things that I've been fighting for is just tell the people or asking the authorities for all the startups, give a moratorium of 3 to 5 years during the initial period, their first 3 years of their life. Don't ask them any questions. Don't ask them to file reports. Don't ask them to file their P&L statement, balance sheet, audited report at the end of the year to the ROC, etc. They know the rules. Let them know the rules. Let them be compliant. If they're not compliant in the first year, no problem. Not compliant in the second year, not a problem. In the third year, with retrospective effect, they can become compliant. Once they see that there is success. There's no point wasting effort, spending a lot of time being fully compliant in the first 1.5 years. And at the end of that, you say that, hey, this idea doesn't have legs, or I didn't get the finance, so I'm going to drop it. That the effort that you spent on those would have been better spent in developing a product or developing an idea or building a team or so many other activities that are required in building a startup. So I would put finance in that category, saying that you need that financial backing for doing what you're set out to do. I mean, unless you have that, you wouldn't even be thinking of starting something. But don't be engulfed by finance at every stage, the early stages. There are a couple of customers I recollect who are technical people who wanted to build an IT product or service, and they were reading about all the shareholders agreement, what is IRR, what is the return, how do they negotiate, how do they get investors. So I said, these skills are all commodity skills that are available. You don't need to spend your time on this. Your time is better spent on the product that you're building, on the service that you're building, much more than any of this. So finance is something that I would put in that category. Finance is required. There are enough people to come and help you to provide the finance. And the finance will come only on the strength of the idea, strength of the team, strength of your passion. So build that so that you have something to show in order to attract finance.
That's really good to hear that you said first 2-3 years they should just carry on with what they're trying to do to at least make sure the startup is in the right direction and then get all the other compliance together. Now we have a question. They have lots of questions on the chat, so we'll take those questions because they're more important. Frederick, you can unmute and ask the question directly to the man himself.
I can read it out. I'm able to see the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, they can ask you directly. Give them a chance to talk to you as well.
All right.
Thank you, sir. It was a very nice motivation. I just was wondering, eventually when you start up with very small, it gradually grows bigger. And have you ever dreamt that Cognizant would have grown this bigger? And how did you think about Cognizant several years ago? How did you perceive that project?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's a good question. When it was started, this company had a different kind of a start. This is something that I don't know how many people realize. It's not a company that started like a startup like all of you are trying to do. This is, in a way, a startup, but it was started with a specific purpose by a larger corporation, a US-based Dun Bradstreet Corporation. They just set up the offshore center, which is what the precursor, the beginning of this firm is. And then it morphed itself when DNB, the original founder of the captive customer, lost interest in this. It transformed itself into an independent service provider company. So the beginning is very different. I mean, more than saying different, I would say it was an easier beginning for this firm. But even then, those of us who started in this firm never thought that it would grow so big. We just had no idea, because at that point of time when we started in the year 1995, there were at least about 25 or more large companies out of India that were occupying a reputed space in this industry. Had we been ranked at the end of 5 years of our starting, we wouldn't even have made it to the top 100. So, being among the top 5, top 3, top 1, etc., was not even something that we thought of. Those things happened subsequently, driven more by the aspirations of the people that came into the firm. As more and more good people came in, started working, built the culture in the company, then they said, there is an opportunity. Why is it that we cannot be a little more ambitious? Why is it that we cannot stretch ourselves a little more? Why can't we be a little more innovative? Why can't we be a little more risk-taking and get on with it? And that's how the whole force happened. So then along came that goal. Okay, I mean, this seems to be an aligned goal. People seem to be aligned around growth, and they do want to make this company to be a company that has to be counted. And clearly the goal that was set out at that point in time was to be among the top 5 Indian companies. This was in the year 2000. So when there was this aspiration, then the leadership in the company said, this is a good aspiration to follow, provided all the encouragement, put the structure, put the strategy in place, and continue to develop the culture that was empowering, that was innovative, that was ambitious, etc. And then the rest of it is the people just grew it. So for most corporations, if you ask, nobody starts with a plan saying that by year 2020 or by my 18th year as a company, when I attain a major age, I want to be a $10 billion company or a 500 crore company. Such thoughts may cross the mind, but it's not something that is shared, and that is not a dream or a desire that drives the team. It becomes gradual. As you taste some success initially, that leads to more and more success.
Yeah, one final thing about this, because about the force you mentioned, how did you transfer the legacy, the founder's legacy, into the next set of team who is taking out Cognizant now?
Yeah, that is a difficult thing. That is a very difficult thing. You as a founding team, you develop, you enlarge the founding team. The founding team will be initially, or the founding leadership will be 3 people, 4 people, 5 people. It grow into 20, 25, 100, up to about 100 people. It's the behavior of these 100 people, if you say in a large organization, would be somewhat similar. If you put 20 questions to these 100 people independently, the chances are that 80% of the answers given by all those 100 people would be identical or somewhat very similar. Because they have done things together, learned together, faced the challenges together. So the thought process will also be somewhat similar.
Exactly.
Whereas to carry that forward for a longer, bigger group, that's a big challenge. And over a period of time, things get diluted, and the dilution happens because of external forces, because of external people coming in. Those type of things could happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for that. Pajista, you can ask the question directly to Lakshmi as well.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good evening, sir. So, sir, in a lot of your articles and your news reports, you've always mentioned that it's very important for startups to think big and not limit their ambition. And you also mentioned something that businesses should have the desire to boil the ocean rather than boiling water for the teapot. So how does one actually identify if you're actually boiling the ocean or a teapot right now?
Yeah, you don't start thinking about boiling the ocean right on day one. That kind of dawns on you once you face success. But then the thought is there. The thought is there. Whatever I do, it must be something that is big. I mean, it's not necessary that it has to be big. I may be perfectly happy. I know I have come across people who come and tell me, hey, this is a small subset that I want to do. I want to make a difference in this particular area. And I have no ambition to make it really big. This is a business that a cash flow business that I'm building for myself. So there are people whose aspirations are also moderated, not by anything, but by the nature, by the environment that they've grown up in, by the qualities that they've imbibed during their childhood days, etc. So, but once you sense that you have something unique, you have something that is better than what others have, and that's the time to say that I really need to take it to a much bigger scale, much higher scale, etc. And it also depends on the idea. If you're doing something, let's say, for example, you want to start a chai shop, a chain of branded chai shops. There are thousands of chai shops that are there. You can follow one model. You may be ambitious to set it up as a big chain eventually, but you don't think about setting up 1,000 retail outlets. You just look at it as I'll do it in this particular area, and if I'm successful here, and if I have growth challenges, I'll stick to this. I'll stop here. I'll continue to nurture that company only for that, and I'll get my opportunity to do something different, or maybe scale up, etc. So to boiling the ocean is something that crosses your mind, but that is not engulfing you. What is engulfing you is the initial success, the initial passion, initial some appreciation, and most importantly, the respect that you get. First 1 or 2 years, saying, hey, this guy's got to set up a retail outlet, small one, but it's fantastic. They deliver fantastic service. I'll give you one just simple example. There's on My Harvest Farms. It's supplying vegetables weekly to certain residences. They've signed up about 1,000 families. Some of the members here may be familiar with it because they may be using it's one of the companies that is mentored by Thai members. So the unique thing is, come what may, I'll deliver. That is the motto that they had. And throughout this period of this pandemic or this lockdown so far in the last 3 months, I've been using them. Not once did they miss. Not a single week. They might say, hey, today, every Tuesday I was coming to your house. May not be possible this week, but I'll definitely come Wednesday or Thursday, and they deliver. They didn't miss. So I respect the founders and respect that company, even if if sometimes it is pricey or the quality is taking a dent at some point in time. I'll continue to work with them because there is something that they stood for, and they gave it their all in order to stay with that focus, with that reputation.
Great. The next question, Rishpak, you can also ask. I'm allowing you, all of you, to interact with Lakshmi directly, so go for it. But
Thank you, Muthu sir.
So I know to let you speak. Please go for it, Rishpak.
Yeah, thank you, Muthu sir, for the opportunity. And good evening, Lakshmi sir. It's an honor to have you here. So my question is regarding the storytelling that you mentioned earlier. So this is storytelling in three aspects. The first aspect in terms of the team, so that they are very much motivated and focused onto the work. The second aspect is with respect to pitching to the investor. And the third aspect is with convincing the customers to be a part of the family or purchase one of the products. So with respect to storytelling, what all should we be including in for these three different scenarios? Thank you very much.
All right. I mean, this storytelling is, it's something that each one, it has to come naturally. Everyone can tell a story. Everyone has a certain style of telling a story. And that style will vary between different people. Some may be appealing to some style will be appealing to a certain set of people, may not be appealing to the other set of people. All that is fine. So when you talk about a story to your co-workers, cohorts, peers, investors, customers, what would appear very natural and honest is one way of your storytelling. There is one way you can narrate a story very passionately, not made out, not rehearsed, not prepared, because this is something that you believe in. I mean, the language may not matter at that point in time, the grammar doesn't matter, but you're conveying a message, conveying a story consistently with all honesty. That will be seen. That is very, very visible. You know, investors, customers, employees, they're all very, very smart people. Whenever you're talking, communicating, it's best to assume that the other person knows as much as you do, if not more. May not be on the product of this thing, but on behavior, on emotions. So by trying to wear a mask and tell a story that is not entirely true, it will be seen. It will be caught in nanoseconds. So don't ever attempt that. It's the same style that you adopt that comes very naturally, that you'll speak very truthfully and honestly, and that will be appreciated, and people will buy or partner with you for that honesty, for that natural you, rather than an artificial you, because the risks of succeeding with an artificial you is when they find the natural you, things are not going to be good. So storytelling is something that you can practice in your own style. There are certain things, of course, you will have to be coached when you, let's say, talk to the press, for example. You become a successful company when somebody wants an interview with you. Then there is a certain preparation that you have to do. I'll just give you this thing that I always tell all the people. The reporters will come and ask you, oh, why did you do this? Why is your company losing money? Or what is the competition, etc. They will ask questions as though they know about the business, about what's happening. But you must assume that you have built the business. You know at any time far more than any reporter on earth can know about your business. So it's not necessary for you to answer the question. It's necessary for you to tell the story and the message that you always wanted to convey, whether it is for your employees, customers, or even to the reporters. But the reporters, the message has to be a little sharp.
Thank you, Lakshmi. As the next question, Rangavasu, you can ask directly to Lakshmi.
Good evening. Thanks, Muthu, for this opportunity. So, Lakshmi, is there a possibility for the data analytics on cancer research as a startup company?
As a startup company, data analytics for cancer research, I mean,
cancer diagnosis.
I would say yes. Data and analytics and using computing power for anything is the way to go. It's not just for oncology, but many other areas, and it is used everywhere. There are very many examples. I'll tell you the type of things that come up. There is this Chennai Mathematical Institute, which is known for research and higher education in mathematics, computer science. They get these type of assignments. a genomics institute or a sequencing company will come up with a whole load of data, dump it on them and say, hey, is there some way you can find some pattern? Can I get some insight out of this data? Can we work together? A company like GE, their research center will come up with a whole bunch of images to them and say, here is my data. Here is the problem that I'm trying to solve. Can you use the data, the images, the analytics, the computing power, and the mathematics behind it to analyze this? And this is happening in the areas of vaccine development, in the areas of tomography, in the area of GPS, so on and so forth. So grounding in mathematics, data science, and the new technologies and techniques like AI and machine learning, etc., will always find use in all spheres of industry verticals, be it healthcare, be it oncology, be it anything.
Is there a way to work with your company? We are a startup in US-based company, and we have a huge amount of data sets.
Sure. I mean, you can work with a company, but if you're a startup, you want to find a good, young, year-sized, matching year-size, hungry, innovative company to partner with, because they will have, in terms of capability of people with the capability, as good a set as a large organization has. They will pay attention to you, unlike a large company.
Lakshmi, I have a question for you. Does a company, should it create value first or before excellence?
Very difficult for me even to comprehend that question. Value, excellence is something that everybody, I mean, you should try for excellence. You should create a culture where everybody tries for excellence. That's the fabric on which you're developing the apparel. That is, unless you constantly think about excelling in whatever you're doing, you'll very soon fall into mediocrity. It's based on that fabric or that foundation values get built.
Okay. There's another question on the chat box by someone called Telemet. So can you want to ask the question directly to Lakshmi? You can unmute and ask. If not, I can read it out. Okay, maybe I read it out. AI to help decision making for practitioners in India. How is the future?
Bright, in a single word. That's how I would say. I mean, this is something that I believed in. Believe that technology will solve all problems. It's a basic fundamental mindset that I have developed over the years that I've been in this industry. I think there's a way we can figure out applying the current technology, the current computing and communication technology, to solve kind of any problem, be it an agriculture problem, a problem that farmer has, an oncology problem, any of this. So it's just a question of applying the right technique at the right time, using the right resources.
Okay, cool. There's a couple of questions from Jana Krishnan. You go ahead and please ask Lakshmi directly.
Yeah, thank you, Muthu, sir. Good evening to all, and very good evening to Lakshmi, sir. This is Professor L. Krishnan, Director from Aspire Medicare Technologies. It is a great feeling to be part of this meeting. I just am very curious that how you make it big and handle it with the initial small team, because the initial team will be very small when you start up, and it really needs a lot of people whom you can trust when you grow big, and especially in the core team, and how you make it progress further. When there are different people have different views towards the same problem, how do you make them like-minded and motivate them to solve a particular problem in that direction and grow further?
Yeah, it's that teamwork that is important, team and collaborative work.
Yes.
If all of them are looking at the same goal, you set yourself a certain goal and share that goal with everyone in the firm. If the CEO or the top leadership thinks that I know what the goal is, I know the 5 steps that I need to take in order to get there. So I'll keep it to myself and have 5 people execute each one of the steps without them sharing that common goal. Normally that wouldn't work.
Yes.
But one of the
We
principle.
work towards vision and mission of the company and keep the goal in mind.
Overall goal, but the important thing about that is to share that goal with everyone and believe that everyone is as interested in achieving that goal. You know, if you have a security person at the door or a person who is helping you bring coffee and tea or any help that you have in the company, you shouldn't assume that, oh, they won't understand what I'm trying to do. You make them understand in a manner that they understand. Give them, you don't have to give all the details, but all of them should feel proud about working in the company, and they should go out and be able to say, I work in this particular company. And if you ask a security of a company as to what that company does, most often they won't know. Oh yeah, it's a bada company or a computer company. They'll say that. But if you tell them in a manner that they can narrate, one, there is greater pride in them, because it's that emotional thing that I talked about. It gives them an identity. And then they will start rowing in the same direction as the rest of the people. They'll pull their weight in the same direction. And there'll be greater value vision alignment across the board. I mean, many of you might have seen that Accenture's ad, where they will show a big fish swimming, and which will be made up of a number of small fish, all of them moving in the same direction. That's the force that you have to build. So it's that sharing that is important. What they essentially say is, have a goal, share your goal with everybody, build a strategy to achieve that goal, and build the structure to achieve that strategy, and then everything else will fall in place. Simple to say, but I can tell you it is simple to execute also.
Yeah, great thought, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Sudha, you can ask Lakshmi directly. You keep on going in and coming out, so I hope you're still there. You can unmute and ask Lakshmi your question. Go for it.
Hi, Sudha. I've got your question. I can read it out and help you if you're unable to unmute. He's talking about the huge corporates which have been built over the years. We have seen its downfall during this pandemic has caused huge concerns. Your comments, please. Oh, that's a business cycle. This is something that could happen to any company, any big firm, large firm, either because of business cycles or because of economic cycles or because of the value cycles that the company follows. So it is to remain and growing and to be respected for a number of years is really a big accomplishment. That's why it's called institution building. You can't call a company, like for example, would you call Cognizant an institution? No, it is still a growing company. It's a company. For it to become an institution and be respected as an institution, it has to go through several cycles, survive several ups and downs, several pandemics, several leadership changes, etc. So that's how institutions and huge corporates are built. And there is a certain brand that will evolve. Like look at what happened to Boeing. Boeing as a company, they have faced very many missteps in the past. They have survived. They remain a leader in that segment. They continue to win a lot of defense contracts, much of which we don't know about. The Boeing 737 MAX is a big setback for them, a huge hit financially, reputationally, and so on and so forth. Now people are saying that, hey, it is how do you consider Boeing an institution? Look at Lockheed Martin. They have a much greater reputation, very honest, defense contracts, etc. So there's this chinks in the armor of Boeing, and they have to come out of that. Hopefully they'll come out, and that's when they'll continue to retain that institution image. Otherwise, there'll also be another big company that is there, but may not have the same reputation as it enjoyed all these years.
Okay, the next question is from Rutu J. You can ask that Rutin directly to Lakshmi. Go for it.
Yeah, hello, sir. I'm a PhD student of telehealth and teleconsultation, and being research as my domain of work, I'm planning to start an organization which will only focus on conducting research for technology-based solutions. But is this as per your view, in your purview, is this a good idea that only research can be a mission for any organization?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. You do some research, you come up with some ideas. Research leads to some fundamental or original idea, original thinking, a proof point, which is something that you might want to license to others in order to earn some money, which can be invested continuously in doing further research and research. It is something that that is eminently doable. There are companies. The one company that I knew, this was years back, I may not even recollect the name. I think it's a human machine, HCI, it used to be called, human computer interface, that had something like 40 or 50 people, all of them PhDs in social sciences and psychology and computer science. And their research was only to see what is the best way of coming up with the user interface. This is the early days of computing.com, and lots of people were using computing devices, interacting and working online. So their idea was just to do research, publish papers, and do some consulting work in order to earn some money and put that money back into research, because those were individuals who were passionate only about research. They were not very interested in building a huge organization, earning a lot of money. So it is possible. I'm sure there are several other examples like that.
Great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Next question is from Telemet Karuna. Please go ahead.
Sir, good evening, sir. So
Yes.
my question, I actually lost my previous question, but I'll ask that. How to find the like-minded people for my company, which is totally dependent on technology, but I am not a tech person. See, I am a doctor and having a hospital. Actually, I am tech savvy, but I don't know about technology per se. So how to find the people, like-minded people, either to recruit or partner with them for my company, which the first question of mine was like this, say for your artificial intelligence to help clinical decision making.
Yeah, I mean, find the first person. The most important thing is find the first person, first technical person that you want to partner with, you want to be either your co-founder, or it could even be a consultant who is helping you set up, helping you recruit other technical person, and then either he moves out or continues to consult with you. I mean, it's good that you have understood that you don't have a particular skill in terms of evaluating technical capability of people. So find the one person who has that ability and have him either on a, I mean, if you think you don't need him on the long term, then you can, typical decision, partner or buy. If you think that that person is required for the long term, buy or hire that person. If you think that you don't require that person, you can develop other people within the organization, that partner. Have an agreement with him for a year. Hey, I want to build a technical team, I need your help. You find all the right technical people. And all I want you to do is, this is the culture, this is the goal that we are having. With that in mind, find an appropriate person with the technical capability. And then you can evaluate the person for a fit in the organization, more a cultural fit in the organization. Is that person, does it have and if you're, let's say you want to focus on customers and delivering a fantastic customer experience, you can evaluate those individuals after the technical evaluation is done, whether they are aligned with your type of values, are they committed to providing that superior customer experience and so on, or are they innovative, that's what is the goal, and so on.
Well, next question, he can't unmute, so I'm going to ask the question. He says, if one sense that might be early for the market, what can one do about it to sustain their presence to make it to the market eventually?
You know, if you're convinced that you're too early for the market, the best is to back off, keep it in the back burner, and come back when the market is ready. It is, to be ruing about it for a long period of time, because you may not know when the market will be ready. So there have been, I mean, these are things that the big companies do very well, particularly when they acquire a new idea. Big companies acquire a new company or a new idea, try it out, they find out that either it is too early or they haven't invested enough in it, they pull it back very quickly. Don't suffer that, and reintroduce it at a later point of time. The brand builders, Unilever, and those type of companies are very good at doing it. When to pull it back, when to relaunch it under a different brand name, so that the memories of the past don't linger in the minds of the customers and so on.
Excellent. Next question is Surab Karadat. You can ask the question directly. Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, hi, good evening. So I am Dr. Shivrankar. I'm working in AIMS right now. So we have built a startup for healthcare service delivery. So like most of us are very young individuals. Like we do not have much experience, more than 5 or 6 years in the healthcare sector. We have some technical people who have passed out of IITs. So like we are kind of very young. So when we go for investing, how much do the investors value the experience of the founders while funding? And what can we do to bridge that gap?
No, quite a lot. The most investors, investing groups, I mean, I don't know if I can say most, but a majority of the ones that I've come across, first thing that they look at is the team, the people behind the idea. You know, as I've been saying, no idea is born great. An idea is an idea, and it's the people who make it a great idea or a foolish idea. So they look at the team first, whether they have the energy, they have the capability, they have the experience, and they have the commitment to take that idea to a company, make that idea into a big company. That's what they look at. So to convince them that you have the capability, you have the passion, you have the expertise to make it successful is what is important. There, in today's context, while some of the investors may value experience, gray hair, etc., but most people are clever enough to understand the team, their passion, the idea, and then when they invest, they'll come in and say, I like you, you have the exact expertise, but you know, one of the key things, key requirements of a CEO of any organization is his ability, her ability to sell, to go out, to interact, to build relationship, to sell. If they find that the person who's leading the firm does not have that capability and it's going to take some time to develop that capability, they'll come in and say, I'll put the money, but then I'm going to bring in a CEO or a salesperson who is going to help you build the business, who's going to be out in the field interacting. And then after that, maybe you can either keep him in the organization or figure out a way of managing that. So they'll come with conditions, but the thing that they evaluate is the team.
Okay, we have one more question from Sudha Subramaniam. Sudha, if you are able to ask, you can ask, or I can read the question out. Okay, I'll read it out, Lakshmi, for the interest of time. Importance of continuing learning and knowledge acquisition being as important as growing your business, your thoughts to young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, that's continuous learning. I'm sure everybody would have emphasized this, saying it has to be a continuous learning, an environment. You know, what gives that, you know, one of the research has shown that why do people stick to a company, stay in the company? There are 3 things that they point to. First and foremost is, you know, at the end of every day, have I learned something new? Have I learned something that I didn't know earlier? Then the level of interest that that individual has in that company is very high. It's a great learning environment. I look forward to getting up in the morning and coming to work because I learned something, and I also get an opportunity to share something that I have learned with others who do not know it. And in the process, I get the appreciation and the respect of other people because I know something that they didn't. So that is a clear thing of that learning environment which attracts people and which gets them to stay. Once they are learning, the second important thing is challenging environment. The workplace has to be somewhat quite challenging. You know, if it is a routine type of thing, routine, of course, gives you the freedom, but then before it becomes monotonous, before it becomes uninteresting, there should be a different type of a challenge, a bigger challenge or a different challenge. So as long as you combine a learning environment with a challenging environment where people are constantly competing and challenging, in a positive, healthy way. That's a good workplace. And the third thing is the purpose and mastery. Is there an opportunity for me to become a master in a particular area? I really would become. I've learned so much. I've faced so many challenging problems and come out of it, solve those type of problems. I'm really the master. Attaining a mastery and being acknowledged to be a master is emotionally such a rewarding experience that you can create a very healthy environment, even in a small team, by providing good learning opportunities, challenging opportunities, and the ability to master in a particular area, that you will be recognized for that.
Leading from that question, Lakshmi, how does startups retain people on a long-term basis? As you know, lots of them move on to larger organizations after a while. There are things like ESOP, things like that. What would your advice to be for the startups? How to keep, besides learning, what else should they be focusing to keep their team together so they can move on to the next stage?
Yeah, it's a question of first building that team during the initial years. You want to keep the people to whom, most large corporations practice this. If there is a purpose that you have and there is someone who's going to help you achieve that purpose at the leadership level, you hire that person. If there is a career opportunity for growth in the organization, you hire that person in the organization. If there's no opportunity for career growth, the company need not hire that individual. You can contract it out, you can subcontract, you can get some consultant, you can get some part-time people, or outsource it. So the startups particularly have to be very careful as to what is the skill and the talent and the people that you need to hire for the long term, and who is it that you want to partner, because their requirement, the skills that they have, the talent that they have is required only for the short term, and you cannot provide a long career path for them. So if you answer that question right up front, then you'll find that you're running a lean organization. You have there may be 30 people working in the company, but full-time employees may be only about 7 or 8 who look to whom you can provide a long-term career path, who can stay in the company, building it, growing it for the longer term, who will be learning every day, challenging every day, who have the opportunity to become a master in their respective area. Keep that to a limited size, and the rest of the people, second, get part-time resources, partner with other people to get it done. That way, every time you find a gap in the competency that's required in the company, you go out and hire that person without thinking about the long term. Then you will have these type of problems. That competency or a gap. That person has come in and filled that gap, but after some time, when the gap no longer exists, that person is going to be fidgety and want out.
What would you, in interest of time, as we're going to get to the top of the hour, what would your advice to be to all these startups? Right now, a lot of them, are not making a lot of inroads to customers. They're not able to get out, even in the medical startups. They're not able to go to hospitals. They're not able to interact with doctors, patients. What would your advice be for them to carry on through this pandemic, as we are indefinite pandemic at the moment?
Yeah, at this stage, I think, or at least I think that one of the skills and the emotional balance that you require is perseverance. This is actually the time when most people are home. You can catch them. You can ask them for a meeting. You can call them and talk to them, because nobody can say that, no, I'm traveling, I'm not available, etc. So, hey, this is the time to be perseverant. And there is one Praveen Shekhar in Thai, you might have heard of his lectures. He would, you should listen to him. He would say, don't be ashamed of asking. Keep asking help. Whatever you want to ask anybody, be shameless and ask that particular help. So this is the time to ask. This is the time to seek help from all the quarters. And 90% of the people may turn you down, but that's okay. That's something at least you tried. And the 10% of the people who respond, it may be valuable. That may solve the problem that you have. So these times are difficult. I'm not saying it is easy, but then this is not the time to give up. This is the time to work doubly hard and make as many contacts as you can, make as many pitches and so on. And so that when things ease, you're ready raring to go.
With that, thank you, Lakshmi, for your time. We always post these Ask Me sessions on our YouTube channel for the benefit of those who were not able to come. I hope that's okay with you. We just get your permission for that. Is that okay?
I don't know if I've said anything controversial or hurt anybody, but anyway, you put it out and saying that it's not right, then you be ready to pull it out.
Yeah. There's nothing been controversial. I think I don't believe anything is motivated by you, and I think it is absolutely, very kind of you to come and spend the hour with us, and it's a great motivation to see someone like you. One of the finest personalities in the IT, not only in India but worldwide, a renowned name. I think it is definitely worthwhile for them to have listened to you. And as a friend, I thank you very much. And you've always been very kind when I reach out to you. Even with my own ideas, you always give me time to spend. I thank you very much for that. And we look forward to seeing you in person at the incubator soon. Thank you very much, Lakshmi, for your time.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone. Enjoyed it.
Many thanks.